The chapel doors slammed open. Clara Winford's wheelchair squeaked down the aisle while 200 people pretended not to stare. She'd survived. Fire lost her mother, lost her legs, but nothing prepared her for the drunk who stumbled through those doors mid-ceremony, laughing about how he'd lit the match that crippled her. Then the silent cowboy at the altar spoke 6 words that froze every spine in that room. Say one more word, I dare you. Hit subscribe now. Stay until the end. Comment your city so I know how far this story travels. Let's ride. The wheel squeaked. Clara Winford gripped the armrests harder, trying to will the sound away. Squeak! Squeak! Every rotation announced what she'd become, what the fire had left behind. Poor thing, someone whispered. Her jaw tightened. Poor thing, like she was a wounded animal, like pity could fill the hole where her old life used to be. The aisle stretched forever. Faces turned. Eyes dropped. Betsy Callahan, who used to race horses with her, studied her hands like they held secrets. Judge Morrison coughed into his fist. Mrs. Chen dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Clara wanted to scream. Her father pushed the chair from behind, his breathing heavy. Guilt made a man wheeze like that. Guilt over the fire. Over the stable he'd bet in a card game. Over the debt that brought Bran Doyle to their door with a torch and a smile. At the altar, a stranger waited. Ezra Cade. Tall, weathered, still as stone. He wore a clean white shirt and held his hat in calloused hands. His face could have been carved from the same granite as the mountains outside town, all hard angles and no give. Clara had never spoken to him, never seen him before last week when her father announced he'd found someone willing to marry her. Found someone, like she was a problem requiring a solution, like she was inventory that needed moving before it spoiled. Almost there, Clara girl, her father muttered. She said nothing. What was the point? They reached the front. Her father positioned her beside the steps she'd never climb again. Ezra turned and his eyes met hers. Gray. Storm cloud gray. He didn't look at her legs, didn't glance at the wheelchair. Just held her gaze for 3 seconds, nodded once, and turned back to face Reverend Walsh. That nod. Clara couldn't explain why it mattered, but it did. Reverend Walsh cleared his throat. Dearly beloved. The chapel doors exploded inward. Bran Doyle stumbled through drunk and grinning. His boots hammered the floorboards. Behind him, Rake and Sully, his pet hyenas, followed with matching smirks. Clara's heart stopped. Well, well, Bran's voice carried to the rafters. Looks like I missed the main attraction. Her father stepped forward. Get out, Doyle. Why? Bran swayed, squinting at the altar. This is a wedding, ain't it? I love weddings, especially the ones where the bride can't run away. He slapped his knee, laughing at his own joke. Someone in the back pews chuckled nervously. Clara's hands turned white on the armrests. She knew that laugh. Bran Doyle, the man who'd burned her mother alive, who'd trapped her in the stable loft, who'd crippled her and rode away whistling. And he was here, making jokes, in her wedding. I said, get out. Her father's voice shook. Or what? Bran took a step closer, his eyes landing on Clara. His grin widened. Or your crippled daughter gonna stop me? Maybe she can roll over my boots, give 'em a good shine. The chapel filled with scattered laughter. Soft. Embarrassed. But there. Clara closed her eyes. This was it. This was her life. Forever. The crippled bride. The punchline. The cautionary tale mothers told daughters about gambling debts and bad choices. Say one more word. The voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. But something in it, something cold and absolute, cut through the noise like a knife through butter. Ezra had spoken. The laughter died. Bran turned, still grinning. What did you... I said. Ezra stepped down from the altar, each footfall deliberate, unhurried. He stopped 3 feet from Bran, and suddenly the drunk outlaw looked smaller. Say one more word. Silence crashed over the chapel. And you'll be picking your teeth out of the Lord's floor. Ezra finished. His voice never rose. Didn't need to. Every single one. Bran's hand twitched toward his gun. Don't. Ezra didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there radiating something dark and dangerous that made Clara's breath catch. I've killed men for less, much less. You really want to find out if I'm bluffing in front of 200 witnesses? The drunk's hand froze mid-reach. Didn't think so. Ezra shifted his gaze to the congregation. Anyone else? Anyone else think my bride is funny? Think fire and pain and loss make a good joke? Step forward. I'll wait. No one moved. Betsy Callahan stared at the floor. Judge Morrison suddenly found his Bible fascinating. Even Reverend Walsh looked away. That's what I thought. Ezra turned back to Bran. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out those doors. You're going to get on your horse. And if I ever see you near my wife again, teeth will be the least of your concerns. We clear. Bran's face turned purple. His jaw worked. His hand hovered near his gun again. Rake grabbed his arm. Boss, come on. Ain't worth it. Listen to your friend, Ezra said softly. He's smarter than you. For 5 seconds, nobody breathed. Clara watched Bran's eyes, watched him calculating odds, weighing pride against survival. Finally, the drunk stepped back. This ain't over, he spat. Yes, Ezra said. It is. Bran shoved past Rake, stormed up the aisle and slammed through the doors. His gang followed. The chapel exhaled collectively. Ezra walked back to the altar, took his place and nodded at Reverend Walsh. Continue. The Reverend blinked, swallowed, found his place in the Bible with trembling fingers. Yes, of course. Do you, Ezra Cade, take this woman? I do. To be your lawfully wedded wife to have and to? I do. Firmer this time. Absolute. All of it. Whatever comes next, I do. Reverend Walsh turned to Clara. And do you, Clara Winford? Yes. The word burst out before she could stop it. Before she could think. Before she could remember that this was an arranged marriage to a stranger who probably wanted her father's 40 acres more than he wanted her. Except he'd just faced down Bran Doyle, the man every lawman in 3 counties was afraid to touch, with nothing but words and presence. He'd made the entire town bow their heads in shame. He'd called her his wife before the vows were even finished. His wife. I now pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Walsh snapped the Bible shut. You may. Ezra knelt. Right there. In front of God and 200 witnesses. He dropped to one knee beside her wheelchair, bringing himself to her level. His hand came up slow, careful, and cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed her skin. A question. Clara nodded. The kiss was brief, soft, respectful. And it tasted like possibility, like maybe she wasn't as broken as everyone said. Like maybe survival was worth something after all. Ezra pulled back his gray eyes holding hers. You survived fire, he whispered, only for her. That makes you the strongest person in this room. Remember that. Then he stood, turned her wheelchair, and pushed her back down the aisle. The wheels still squeaked. But this time, Clara didn't care. This time, she had a man who'd made an entire town kneel with 6 words. Say one more word. I dare you. Outside, heat slapped her face. Ezra lifted her from the wheelchair, gentle, efficient, and settled her onto the wagon bench. He folded the chair into the back like he'd done it 1,000 times. You've practiced that, Clara said. I prepared. He climbed up beside her. There's a difference. The wagon lurched forward. Duskwater fell away behind them, the chapel, the whispers, the pity. Clara should have been terrified, should have been mourning her lost freedom. Instead, she felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. Hope. Where are we going? She asked. Home, White Creek. Built the cabin last spring. He clicked his tongue and the horses picked up speed. It's not much, but it's ours. Ours. Clara studied him. This stranger, this husband, the hard line of his jaw, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands held the reins firm but not cruel. Why? The question exploded out. Why marry me? The land can't be worth nothing to do with land. Then what? His jaw worked. Silence stretched between them like barbed wire. Finally, I owed you. Clara's blood went cold. Owed me. We've never even... 2 years ago. Each word sounded ripped from somewhere deep. I was deputy on duty the night your father's stable burned. The world tilted. What? I was there. He stared straight ahead at the road. Saw the flames. Saw Bran Doyle and his gang riding away laughing. I could have stopped them. Should have chased them down. But I froze. By the time I moved, the fire had spread. Your mother was already gone. You were trapped in the loft. I pulled you out, but the beam had already crushed my legs. Clara's voice came out flat. Dead. I remember arms lifting me. Smoke. Pain. That was you. That was me. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The man who'd saved her was also the man who'd failed her. The man who could have prevented everything if he'd just moved faster. I resigned the next day. Ezra continued. Left town. Spent 2 years drifting trying to outrun it. Then I heard you were still unmarried. Still trapped in your father's house while the town threw pity at you like coins to a beggar. So I came back. Out of guilt. Out of responsibility. He finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes nearly stopped her heart. I don't expect forgiveness, Clara. I don't expect anything. But I can give you a home where no one pities you, where no one mocks you, where you're safe. That's all I'm offering. The wagon rolled on. Clara's mind spun trying to hold all of this. The rescue, the failure, the guilt, the marriage. Trying to reconcile the man who'd just made Bran Doyle back down with the deputy who'd hesitated while her life burned away. You should have told me before the wedding. Would you have said yes? Honest question. It deserved honesty back. No. That's why I kept silent. No apology in his voice, just fact. I needed you to say yes, needed to start making this right. I know that's selfish. But Clara, you were dying in that town. Slowly. Every day. Crushed under pity, heavier than any beam. At least with me you'll be seen. Not as the crippled girl, but as a woman who survived hell and came out breathing. You don't know me. No. He nodded once. But I'd like to, if you'll let me. The cabin appeared around a bend. Small, sturdy, pine logs still fresh, and leading up to the door ramps. He'd built ramps. Clara's throat closed. She couldn't speak. Couldn't process that this man, this guilt-driven haunted cowboy, had thought that far ahead. Had built accessibility into his walls. Ezra stopped the wagon set. The brake climbed down. He came to her side, arms out, then paused. May I? 2 words. Asking permission. Treating her like she still had choices. Yes, Clara whispered. He lifted her carefully, carried her up the ramp, and pushed the door open with his boot. Inside one main room, kitchen area, bedroom beyond. Clean. Simple. And everywhere she saw adaptations. Low counters, accessible hooks, modified furniture. He'd thought of everything. Ezra settled her on the sofa, then stepped back. I'll get your chair. He turned to leave. Wait. He froze. Clara looked at him, really looked. At the guilt carved into every line of his face. At the way he stood like a man waiting for judgment. At the cabin he'd built like a temple to atonement. I should hate you, she said slowly. I should hate you for hesitating, for failing, for not telling me the truth. I know. But I don't. The words surprised her as much as him. Because you came back. Not to make yourself feel better, not to beg forgiveness, but to give me something no one else would, a life where I'm not just poor Clara. Her voice cracked. So I can't hate you. But I can't forgive you either. Not yet. Ezra nodded. That's fair. And I need you to understand something. Clara met his storm-gray eyes. I survived fire because I refused to quit. I'll survive this marriage the same way. On my terms. With my dignity intact. Can you live with that? For the first time, his mouth quirked. Almost a smile. I'm counting on it. He left to tend the horses, leaving Clara alone in this cabin built from guilt and hope. She sat there as afternoon light painted the walls gold, feeling her heartbeat steady and strong. Maybe survival wasn't the end of her story. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. And maybe this haunted cowboy with his terrible debt and his careful hands was exactly what she needed to remember that fire hadn't taken everything. It had left her breath, her will, her strength. And now, impossibly, it had left her a man who'd made a town kneel because someone dared to mock what flames couldn't destroy. Clara pressed her hand to her chest and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Alive. The first night, Clara didn't sleep. She lay in the bedroom Ezra had given her, his bedroom he'd said he'd take the sofa, and stared at the ceiling beams. Every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps. Every whisper of wind through the pines sounded like laughter. Bran Doyle's laughter. The chapel's laughter. The sound that had followed her for 2 years, like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Through the thin wall, she heard Ezra moving. Quiet. Careful. Like he was trying not to remind her he existed. She almost called out. Almost asked him to come sit in the chair by the window just so she wouldn't be alone with her thoughts. But pride stoppered the words in her throat. She'd told him she'd survive this marriage on her terms. Needing him on the first night would make her a liar. So she waited for dawn. When gray light finally crept through the window, Clara heard the front door open and close. She pushed herself up, transferred to the wheelchair he'd left beside the bed, positioned perfectly. She noticed at exactly the right height and rolled to the window. Ezra stood by the creek, shirtless, washing. Water sluiced over his shoulders, and Clara saw what clothes had hidden. Scars. Dozens of them. Knife wounds. Bullet holes. A burn mark across his ribs that looked like someone had tried to brand him. Her breath caught. What kind of deputy collected scars like that? He turned and she jerked back from the window. Her heart hammered. She shouldn't have watched. Shouldn't have looked. But something about those scars made her own damaged body feel less alone. 20 minutes later, he knocked on her door. 3 soft taps. "I'm awake," she called. He opened the door, dressed now in a clean work shirt. His hair was still damp. He didn't meet her eyes. "Breakfast is ready, if you want it. If you don't, that's fine too. I'll leave a plate on the table." Then he was gone before she could respond. Clara rolled out to find eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits waiting. The coffee smelled strong enough to wake the dead. She stared at the spread, then at the empty room. He'd cooked all this and disappeared like a ghost. She ate alone. This became their pattern. Ezra would wake before dawn, make breakfast, then vanish to mend fences, chop woodwork, the small garden he'd planted behind the cabin. He'd return for lunch, eat quickly without speaking, then disappear again. Dinner was the same. He'd cook, serve, and retreat to the porch while she ate. 3 days passed like this. 3 days of silence broken only by the scrape of forks on plates and the creak of floorboards. 3 days of living with a ghost who happened to make excellent biscuits. On the 4th day, Clara snapped. He'd just set down her lunch venison stew, still steaming, and turned to leave when she grabbed his wrist. "Stop!" He froze, stared at her hand on his arm like it was a rattlesnake. "Sit down," Clara said. Eat with me. I can't take another meal alone. I thought you'd prefer. You thought wrong. She released him, but held his gaze. I didn't marry a ghost, Ezra. I married a man. So sit. Please. He hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from her. Sat. Picked up his spoon. The silence stretched between them like barbed wire. Clara forced herself to speak. The scars. On your back. Where'd you get them? His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. That's not dinner conversation. We don't have any other kind of conversation, so it'll have to do. Ezra set down his spoon carefully. You saw. This morning. Through the window. I didn't mean to spy. But I saw. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, after I left Duskwater, I drifted south. Took a job protecting a cattle drive to El Paso. Bandits hit us outside Abilene. I took 3 bullets and a knife before I put them down. Them how many? 4. Clara's stomach clenched. You killed 4 men. They killed 6 drovers first. Good men. Family men. His voice stayed flat, emotionless, like he was reciting a shopping list. I did what needed doing. And the burn mark. His jaw tightened. Different job, different time, doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? His eyes snapped to hers, and for the first time, she saw something crack through his careful control. Why do my scars matter to you? You want to catalog all the ways I've failed, all the times I wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough. The anger in his voice surprised her. Good. Anger meant he was still human under all that stone. No, Clara said quietly. I want to understand who I married. I want to know what made you into someone who could face down Bran Doyle without flinching. I want to know if those scars hurt as much as mine do. The anger drained from his face. He looked away out the window toward the creek. Every day. They hurt every day. Something in Clara's chest loosened. Mine too. They ate in silence after that, but it felt different. Less like 2 strangers avoiding each other, and more like 2 wounded people learning to exist in the same space. That night, Clara heard Ezra pacing, back and forth across the main room. The floorboards creaked under his weight's steady rhythm like a caged animal. She counted the steps. 37 before he'd turn. 37 back. She knew that pacing. Had done it herself in her father's house before the wheelchair when she could still move. That was the walk of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. The next morning, she found him asleep on the porch, slumped against the cabin wall. His face looked younger in sleep, less haunted. She watched him for a moment, then cleared her throat. He jerked awake, hand going to his hip where a gun would have been if he wore one around the cabin. Bad dreams? Clara asked. He rubbed his face. Something like that. Me too. She rolled closer. Every night since the fire. Sometimes I still smell the smoke. Still feel the heat. Still hear my mother screaming. The words came out easier than she'd expected. Maybe because he'd shared his scars first. Does it get better? No. His honesty was brutal. But you get stronger. Learn to carry it without it crushing you. How long did that take you? Still working on it. Clara laughed, a sharp, broken sound that surprised them both. Great. So we're both disasters. Pretty much. The corner of his mouth quirked, almost a smile. But we're disasters with good coffee and a roof that doesn't leak. Could be worse. Could be married to someone who pities me. Could be married to someone who expected me to pretend the past didn't happen. He stood stretched. His shirt rode up, showing another scar. This one jagged, like something had tried to gut him. You want breakfast? I want to help make it. He blinked. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Clara rolled toward the door. I've spent 2 years having things done for me. I'd like to do something with someone for a change. They cooked together. Ezra scrambled eggs while Clara mixed biscuit dough at the low counter he'd built. Their elbows bumped twice. He apologized both times. She told him to stop apologizing. "I'm not made of glass," she said, kneading the dough harder than necessary. "I won't shatter if you touch me." "I know that." "Do you?" She looked up at him. "Because you act like I'm something fragile, like I might break if you breathe too hard." Ezra set down the pan, turned to face her fully. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Clara, but that doesn't mean I want to add to your burdens. Doesn't mean I want to be one more thing weighing you down." "You're not a burden." The words came out fierce. "Certain. You're the first person in 2 years who's treated me like a human being instead of a tragedy. Do you understand what that means to me?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, "I'm starting to." They ate the breakfast they'd made together, and it tasted better than anything Ezra had cooked alone. The days began to develop a rhythm. Not comfortable, yet too much history between them for comfort, but something resembling partnership. Clara would read to him in the evenings from the books he'd stacked on the low shelf. Moby Dick, The Count of Monte Cristo, adventure stories about men who'd lost everything and fought to get it back. She suspected he'd chosen them specifically for her. Ezra listened while he carved. Wood shavings curled from his knife, transforming chunks of pine into birds, horses, flowers. His hands moved with the same careful precision he used for everything: deliberate, patient, thorough. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Clara asked one evening, watching an owl emerge from the wood. "My father, before he died." Ezra blew sawdust from the carving. "Only good thing he ever taught me." "What did he teach you that wasn't good?" The knife stopped. "How to take a beating without crying. How to hide bruises where teachers wouldn't see them. How to make yourself small so you wouldn't be a target." His voice stayed level, but his knuckles whitened around the knife handle. "Real useful skills for a kid." Clara's chest tightened. "He hit you." "Every day I can remember before I turned 12. "What happened when you turned 12? "I got bigger than him." Ezra resumed carving. "He died that winter. Pneumonia. I didn't cry at his funeral." "I wouldn't have either." He looked up, then surprise flickering across his face. "Most people say I should have forgiven him, that he was sick or troubled or whatever excuse makes them feel better about what he did." "Most people are idiots." Clara leaned forward. "You don't owe forgiveness to someone who hurt you, not even family, especially not family." Something in Ezra's expression shifted, softened. "Your father ever hurt you?" "Not with his fists." She chose her words carefully. "But after the fire, after my mother died, he looked at me like I was a punishment. Like God had taken the wrong daughter. He never said it out loud, but I heard it anyway. In the silence. In the way he'd leave the room when I rolled in. In how fast he agreed when you offered to marry me." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You gave me an escape." Clara held his gaze. Even if it came wrapped in guilt and secrets, it was still an escape. "So thank you. For that at least." Ezra finished the owl, held it up to the lamplight, then handed it to her. "For you, if you want it." The wood was smooth under her fingers, warm from his hands. The owl's eyes stared out with fierce intelligence, and Clara realized this wasn't just a carving. It was a message. You survived. You're still here. You're still strong. "I want it," she said quietly. "Thank you." That night, she placed the owl on the windowsill beside her bed, and when the nightmares came, smoke and fire, and her mother's screams, she opened her eyes to find the owl watching. Standing guard, reminding her that she'd survived worse than dreams. 2 weeks into their marriage, Clara woke to find Ezra gone. Not just working, the horses were still in their pen, the tools still in their places. Gone. Panic clawed up her throat. She rolled through the cabin calling his name. No answer. She checked the creek, the garden, the smokehouse. Nothing. Had he left? Had the guilt finally crushed him? Had he decided 2 weeks of playing husband was enough penance and run? She was halfway to a full panic when she heard it. Hammering. Coming from behind the cabin past the garden where she hadn't ventured yet. Clara rolled around the corner and stopped. Ezra was building something. A platform waist-high with ramps leading up on both sides. And beside it in a makeshift corral stood a horse. Old, gray-muzzled, gentle-eyed. He saw her and straightened hammer in hand. "You're up early." "What is this?" "Mounting block, modified." He gestured at the platform. "Thought you might want to try riding again. If you're interested. No pressure. But I figured—" He stopped, started again. "You told me you used to race. Before. So I thought maybe—" Clara couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The mounting block. The gentle horse. The careful way he'd positioned everything at wheelchair height. He'd been planning this, working on it for days probably, while she slept. While she read to him, building her a way back to something the fire had stolen. "Her name's Willow." Ezra continued, filling her silence. "Bought her off a farmer in town. She's old, steady, won't spook. We can start slow, just sitting. Get your balance back. Build up your core strength. Or we don't have to start at all. It's your choice." "Why?" The word came out broken. He set down the hammer. "Because you're not just surviving, Clara. You're alive. And alive means more than breathing. It means doing the things that make you remember why breathing matters." Tears burned her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I might not be able to do it. I haven't ridden in 2 years. My legs don't work right. I could fall. I could—" "So you fall." Ezra's voice was gentle. "And I catch you. And we try again. That's what partners do." Partners. Not savior and victim. Not guilty party and injured party. Partners. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay. Okay. Let's try. Now, before I lose my nerve." Ezra led Willow to the mounting block, positioned Clara's wheelchair at the base of the ramp. He held out his hand. She took it. His grip was warm, calloused, steady as the earth. He helped her transfer from chair to ramp, supporting her weight when her legs wouldn't cooperate. They moved slowly, step by painful step, until she reached the platform. Willow stood patient as stone. Ezra positioned the horse parallel, then looked at Clara. "Ready." Her heart hammered. Her legs trembled. Every muscle in her body screamed that this was impossible, that fire had taken this from her forever, that she should give up now before hope destroyed her again. But Ezra's hand stayed steady in hers. And his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, held no pity. Only belief. "Ready," Clara whispered. The transfer took 10 minutes. Ezra supported her completely, taking her weight, positioning her legs, adjusting her balance. When she finally sat in the saddle after 2 years of believing she never would again, Clara felt something crack open inside her chest. She was crying, couldn't stop. Tears streamed down her face while Willow stood steady beneath her, and Ezra kept his hand on her leg, anchoring her. "I'm sitting on a horse," she said, voice breaking. "I'm sitting on a horse." "You are." Ezra smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less haunted. "How's it feel? Like flying?" Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to contain the sob building in her throat. "Like I'm alive again." They stayed there for only 5 minutes. Any longer, and her legs would have given out. But those 5 minutes rewrote everything Clara thought she knew about her future. That night, when the nightmares came, she didn't smell smoke. She smelled horse and leather and possibility. The next morning, Clara made coffee and waited for Ezra on the porch. He came out, saw her, and stopped. "You're up early." "So are you." She handed him a cup. "I want to go again. To the mounting block. Every day. Until I can ride properly." "Will you help me?" "Every day," he agreed without hesitation. "For as long as it takes." "It might take months, years. I might never get strong enough to—" "Doesn't matter." He sat beside her shoulder, almost touching hers. We've got time, and I'm not going anywhere. Clara studied his profile, the hard jaw, the scarred eyebrow, the mouth that rarely smiled. This man who'd failed her and saved her in the same moment. Who'd married her out of guilt, but stayed out of something else. Something neither of them had names for yet. Ezra? Yeah. I'm still angry at you. For hesitating. For not stopping Bran that night. His jaw tightened. I know. But I'm also grateful. For the mounting block. For the ramps. For treating me like I'm more than my wheelchair. She took a breath. I don't know how to hold both of those feelings at once. The anger and the gratitude. They don't fit together. They don't have to fit. Ezra looked at her then. You're allowed to be angry and grateful, hurt and healing. Nothing about this is simple, Clara. We don't have to pretend it is. Relief washed through her. Good, because pretending is exhausting. Yeah. He clinked his cup against hers. It really is. They sat on the porch as the sun climbed, drinking coffee in comfortable silence. And for the first time since the wedding, Clara thought maybe, just maybe, this marriage built on guilt and secrets and shared scars might actually become something real, something worth fighting for, something like home. 6 weeks after the wedding, Clara rode Willow unassisted for the first time. Not far, just 20 yards from the mounting block to the creek and back. But she did it without Ezra's hand steadying her, without his voice guiding every movement. Just her and the horse and the strength she'd clawed back one agonizing day at a time. When she made it back to the platform, Ezra was grinning like a fool. You did it, he said, helping her dismount. Clara, you actually did it. I know. She was shaking adrenaline and triumph, making her hands tremble. I can't believe I know, but I know. He laughed, a sound she'd heard maybe 3 times since they married, and before either of them thought about it, he pulled her into a hug, just wrapped his arms around her and held on while she trembled against his chest. Clara froze. They'd never touched like this, never been this close except during transfers, and those were clinical necessary. This was different. This was celebration. This was 2 people sharing joy without the weight of guilt or obligation pressing between them. She let herself lean into him, just for a moment, just long enough to feel his heartbeat against her cheek and realize that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Ezra Cade had stopped being the stranger she'd married and started being something else entirely. He pulled back, first clearing his throat. Sorry, I shouldn't have. It's fine. Clara's face felt hot. It was nice. The hug, I mean. It was a nice hug. Right, nice. He rubbed the back of his neck, not meeting her eyes. I'll get Willow settled. You should rest. That was a lot for your first solo ride. He disappeared into the barn before she could respond, leaving Clara on the mounting block, feeling like she'd just crossed some invisible line they'd both been carefully avoiding. That night, Clara couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't nightmares keeping her awake. It was the memory of Ezra's arms around her, the way his heart had beat steady beneath her ear, the warmth of him solid and real, and there in a way no one else had been since the fire. She got up, transferred to her chair, and rolled to the window. Outside, the sky was doing something strange. Clouds gathered thick and dark on the horizon, moving fast. Too fast. Lightning flickered in their depths. Not the clean forks she was used to, but sprawling webs that illuminated the entire sky. Storm coming. A bad one. Clara rolled to the main room and found Ezra already awake, standing at the window with his arms crossed. How long until it hits? She asked. He didn't turn. Hour, maybe less. You should sleep. Nothing you can do about weather. Can't. His voice was tight, strained. Storms make me remember things I'd rather forget. Clara moved closer. What things? Thunder rumbled in the distance. Ezra's shoulders tensed. My father died in a storm, he said quietly. Pneumonia took him, but it was the storm that finished it. He drowned in his own lungs while lightning turned the world white and thunder shook the house. I was 12, sat beside his bed and watched him die. Took 3 hours. Every time the thunder crashed, he'd jerk like someone was hitting him. Even dying, he couldn't stop flinching. Clara's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. I told you I didn't cry at his funeral. He finally turned to look at her. But storms still make me feel 12 again. Helpless, watching something terrible happen and not being able to stop it. Lightning flashed. For just a second, his face was illuminated, and Clara saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Fear. Raw, unconcealed fear. Talk to me, she said. Tell me something. Anything. Just don't stand there alone with your memories. Ezra hesitated, then moved to the sofa, sat down heavily. Clara rolled closer, positioning herself across from him. What do you want to know? He asked. Everything. Clara folded her hands in her lap. We've been married 6 weeks, and I know you take your coffee black. You carve when you're anxious and you can't sleep through storms. But I don't know where you were born, what you dream about, why you became a deputy in the first place. Those are big questions. We've got all night. Lightning flashed again closer now. And neither of us is sleeping anyway. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. But you have to answer too. Fair trade. Fair trade. Thunder crashed overhead. The cabin shuddered. Ezra's hands clenched on his knees, but he started talking. I was born in Oklahoma Territory, town called Guthrie. My mother died when I was 4, don't remember her much. Just that she sang while she cooked, and her hands were always soft. My father was a carpenter. Good one when he was sober, which wasn't often. He paused as rain began hammering the roof. After she died, he started drinking more, hitting more. I learned to disappear, got good at it, would hide in the woods for days sometimes, just to avoid going home. Clara listened, her heart breaking for the boy he'd been. How'd you survive? Neighbors fed me sometimes. Old woman named Mrs. Patterson would leave sandwiches on her porch. Never said anything about it, just left food where she knew I'd find it. Probably saved my life. His voice went rough. After my father died, I stayed with her for a year. She taught me to read properly, taught me manners, taught me I wasn't worthless just because my father said I was. Then she died too. Heart gave out in her sleep. I was 13. What did you do? Drifted, worked ranches, stables, anywhere that'd have me. Learned to ride, learned to shoot, learned to fight. By the time I was 16, I could outshoot men twice my age. He flexed his scarred hands. Circuit judge saw me win a shooting competition in Tulsa. Offered me a job as deputy. Said I had the temperament for it. Steady hands, calm mind, didn't scare easy. He was right. Was he? Ezra's laugh was bitter. Because the first time it mattered, the first time someone really needed me to be fast and brave and decisive, I froze. Stood there like a scared kid while Bran Doyle burned your world down. Lightning blazed. Thunder shook the walls. Ezra flinched so hard Clara saw it despite the darkness. Come here, she said. He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. What? Come here. Sit beside me. You're too far away and I can't. She stopped, swallowed. I can't reach you from over there. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then he crossed the space between them and sat on the floor beside her wheelchair. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers like a drowning man grabbing a rope. Tell me about that night, she said. The fire, all of it. Not just what you did wrong, what you did right. There wasn't anything right about that night. You pulled me out. That was right. After I hesitated. But you didn't run. Clara squeezed his hand. You could have. You could have seen those flames, seen Bran riding away, and decided it was too dangerous, too risky. You could have waited for help, but you didn't. You went in anyway. So tell me about that part. The rain turned torrential. Water pounded the roof like fists. Ezra's whole body was tense, coiled tight as a spring. "I heard you screaming," he said finally. "Not for help, just screaming, the kind of sound a person makes when they're sure they're going to die. And I knew that if I didn't move right then, you would. So I tied a bandana over my face and went in through the side door. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see 2 feet ahead. The heat was—" He stopped breathing hard. I'd never felt anything like it, like standing in front of hell's open mouth. Clara stayed quiet, letting him talk. "I heard you above me. In the loft. Heard the beams cracking. I climbed the ladder, even though the rungs were burning my hands. Got to the top and saw you pinned under a fallen beam, your legs trapped, coughing so hard I thought you'd die before I could reach you. The roof was coming down. I had maybe 30 seconds. What did you do?" "I lifted the beam, don't know how. Shouldn't have been possible, that thing weighed twice what I did. But I got it up enough for you to pull free, and then I carried you down that ladder and out the door. We made it maybe 10 feet before the whole structure collapsed." His voice cracked. "Your mother was still inside." Thunder exploded directly overhead. Ezra jerked, and Clara felt his hand start to slip from hers. She tightened her grip, refusing to let go. "Look at me," she commanded. He did. His eyes were wet. "You saved my life," Clara said, each word deliberate, forceful. "You went into a burning building and pulled me out. Yes, you hesitated before going after Bran, but when it came down to it, when someone needed saving, you didn't hesitate. You moved. You climbed that ladder. You lifted that beam. You got me out." "Your mother was already dead." The words hurt to say, but they were true. "I heard her screams stop before you ever arrived. The fire took her fast. There was nothing you could have done." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Clara's voice broke. "Because I was there, Ezra. I was in that loft. I heard everything. My mother's screams lasted maybe a minute after the fire started. She was in the house, not the stable. By the time you arrived, she was already gone. The only person you could have saved was me. And you did." He stared at her. "You never told anyone that." "I couldn't. Everyone wanted someone to blame. If they knew my mother died that fast, they'd have to accept it was just a tragedy. No villains except Bran. No deputies who failed. Just fire and bad luck, and a man who deserved to hang." She pulled his hand closer, pressed it between both of hers. "I let them think you could have saved her because it was easier than accepting that some things can't be saved. But I'm done lying. To them. To you. To myself." Lightning painted the room white. Thunder followed immediately, so loud, Clara's ears rang. But Ezra didn't flinch this time. He just stared at her like she'd cracked open the sky and shown him stars he'd forgotten existed. "Why are you telling me this now?" he whispered. "Because you've spent 2 years punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. Because you built me ramps and mounting blocks and gave me my life back, and I think I owe you the truth." Clara's voice steadied. "And because I'm tired of us both carrying guilt for things we couldn't control. I should have chased Bran. Probably. But you didn't, and you can't change that." She leaned forward, making sure he heard every word. "What you can change is what happens now. Bran's still out there, still free, still laughing about what he did. So stop punishing yourself and start figuring out how we make him answer for it." Ezra's expression shifted. The guilt receded slightly, replaced by something harder, sharper. You think I'm letting you handle him alone? He burned my mother alive, crippled me, made you feel like a failure for 2 years." Clara's jaw set. "When he comes back, and he will come back, I'm going to be there. I'm going to watch him face justice. And I'm going to make sure he knows I survived him." "Clara, don't." She cut him off. "Don't tell me it's too dangerous. Don't tell me to stay safe while you handle things. I'm not a China doll, Ezra. I'm a woman who's been underestimated her entire life. Bran Doyle thinks he broke me. I want him to learn exactly how wrong he is." Something in Ezra's face changed. The fear faded, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. You're terrifying when you're determined. You know that? Good. I'm tired of being pitied. She released his hand, suddenly aware of how long she'd been holding it. Now tell me the rest. About the scars. About where you went after you left Duskwater. About the men you killed. That's not a happy story. I don't want happy. I want honest. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, something else was happening. A different kind of storm. The kind that cleared air instead of churning it. That left things cleaner, if not necessarily calmer. Ezra talked through the night, told her about the cattle drive, about the bandits who'd tried to kill him, about the jobs he'd taken afterward, bounty hunting, mostly tracking men who'd skipped bail or murdered their way across state lines, about the fights he'd won and the ones that had left him scarred. I was good at it, he admitted, finding people who didn't want to be found, bringing them in, dead or alive depending on what the bounty specified. Made good money. Enough to buy land, build a cabin, start over. He looked at her. Enough to offer your father a dowry when I came back to make things right. My father took money for me. 40 acres and $500. Ezra's voice was gentle. I know that sounds crude, but he wasn't selling you Clara. He was making sure you'd be taken care of after he died. Making sure you'd have security. Security. The word tasted bitter. Is that what I am? A transaction? No. He said it with such force that Clara blinked. You're my wife, my partner, the strongest person I've ever met. The money was just, it was a formality. Your father wanted proof I could provide for you. So I gave him proof. And the land. I'm giving it back. Soon as the year's up and we can transfer the deed. He held her gaze. I didn't marry you for 40 acres, Clara. I married you because I owed you a life. And because... He stopped. Because what? Thunder crashed softer now. The storm was moving east, taking its fury with it. Dawn couldn't be far off. Because I saw you once, Ezra said quietly. Before the fire. I was in town buying supplies, and you rode past on that chestnut mare you loved. You were racing Tommy Chen, and you were winning, and you were laughing like the whole world was yours for the taking. And I thought... He looked away. I thought you were the most alive person I'd ever seen. Clara's breath caught. You remembered me. Never forgot you. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. After the fire, when I heard what happened, I couldn't get that image out of my head. You on that horse laughing free. And I knew I'd stolen that from you by freezing. So when I came back and saw you in that wheelchair, saw the town treating you like a ghost, I thought maybe I could give you back some of what I took. Not all of it. Never all of it. But something. The mounting block. And the ramps. And the low counters. And everything else. He finally met her eyes again. I wanted you to feel alive again, Clara. Even if you couldn't forgive me. Even if you hated me forever. I wanted you to remember what it felt like to be more than your wheelchair. Clara couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around too many emotions to name. Gratitude, anger, wonder. Something else she wasn't ready to examine. I don't hate you, she managed finally. You should. Well, I don't. She reached out, and this time, when she touched his face, he didn't pull away. Just closed his eyes like her hand was the only thing keeping him anchored. You're an idiot for thinking guilt was a good foundation for a marriage, but you're my idiot now, and I think... She swallowed hard. I think maybe we're building something better than guilt, something that might actually last. He opened his eyes. They were still wet, but the fear had faded. What are we building? I don't know yet. Clara's thumb brushed his cheek, wiping away moisture. But I'd like to find out. If you're willing. I'm willing. He covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. I'm so damn willing, Clara. They stayed like that as dawn broke, as the storm moved on and left the world washed clean. As something fragile and new and impossibly precious formed between them in the space where guilt used to live. When the sun finally rose, Ezra stood and helped Clara back to her room. But at the door, she stopped him. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me everything, for being honest. Thank you for listening." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Brief, gentle. Nothing like their wedding kiss. "Get some sleep. We'll ride again this afternoon." He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Clara sat in her wheelchair and touched her forehead where his lips had been. Her heart beat too fast. Her thoughts spun in circles. Something had changed last night. Some wall between them had crumbled, and Clara wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. Maybe both. She transferred to bed and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying the night, his confession, his tears, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken, the way she'd touched his face and meant it. Outside, she heard Ezra moving around, feeding the horses, splitting wood, normal morning chores. But nothing about this morning felt normal. Everything felt balanced on a knife's edge, waiting to tip one direction or the other. By afternoon, they were both exhausted, but pretending otherwise. Clara rode Willow for 30 minutes, pushing herself harder than usual. Ezra watched from the fence, ready to catch her if she fell, but she didn't fall. She rode like she had something to prove. Maybe she did. When she finally dismounted, Ezra was there to steady her. His hands lingered on her waist longer than necessary. She didn't pull away. "You're getting stronger," he said. "I had good motivation." Clara looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her stomach flip. "Ezra." "Yeah. Last night. What you said about seeing me before the fire. About remembering me laughing." "What about it? Did you mean it, or were you just—" She struggled for words. "Were you trying to make me feel better?" His hands tightened on her waist. "I meant every word. You want proof." He didn't wait for an answer. "You were wearing a blue dress. Your hair was in a braid down your back. Tommy Chen's horse was a gray gelding that tried to bite yours at the starting line. You won by 3 lengths and nearly ran over Judge Morrison's cat at the finish. And when you laughed—" His voice went rough. "When you laughed, it sounded like music. Like every good thing in the world compressed into one sound." Clara stared at him. He'd remembered everything, every detail. He'd been carrying that memory for years. "Why didn't you ever talk to me?" she whispered. "Before the fire. If you noticed me, why didn't you?" "Because you were sunlight, and I was a kid with a drunk father and no prospects. Because you deserved better than a deputy's salary and a man with more scars than sense." He released her waist, stepped back. "Because I knew even then that you were too good for me." "That's not your choice to make." "What?" "Whether I'm too good for you. Whether I deserve better. Those aren't your choices, Ezra." Clara's voice shook. "They're mine. And maybe I get to decide that a man who builds mounting blocks and remembers what my laugh sounds like is exactly what I deserve." The air between them went taut, charged, like lightning before it struck. "Clara, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say anything else tonight. We're both exhausted. We both said things in that storm that we need time to process. So let's just get through today. Tomorrow we can figure out what any of this means." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow." But that night when Clara lay in bed, she knew tomorrow wouldn't fix anything. Tomorrow would just bring them closer to the inevitable moment when they'd have to decide if this marriage built on guilt and confession and mounting blocks could become something else, something real, something terrifying, something like love. Tomorrow came with the sound of hoofbeats. Clara was in the garden practicing transfers from her wheelchair to the low bench Ezra had built when she heard them. Multiple horses, moving fast, coming up the creek trail toward the cabin. Her blood went cold. Ezra was inside making lunch. She opened her mouth to call him, but before she could make a sound, he was already there, moving fast, his hand on the rifle he'd grabbed from inside. "Get to the cabin," he said. His voice was calm, flat. The voice of a man who'd done violence and expected to do it again. "Now, Clara." "How many?" "At least 3. Maybe more." He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on the trail. "Go, please." She started to argue, then saw his face. Saw the fear there, not for himself, but for her. So she rolled toward the cabin as fast as her arms could move, hating every second of retreat, but trusting him enough to do it anyway. She made it to the porch when the riders came into view. Bran Doyle led them. He looked worse than he had at the wedding, meaner, drunker, with 2 months of festering rage carved into every line of his face. Behind him rode Rake and Sully, plus 2 more men Clara didn't recognize, all armed, all grinning like they'd come to a party. "Well, well," Bran called out, reining his horse to a stop 30 feet from where Ezra stood. "If it ain't the hero Cowboy. Heard you've been playing house with the cripple. That working out for you?" Ezra said nothing, just stood there with the rifle held loose in his hands, watching. "Not much of a talker, are you?" Bran dismounted, swaying slightly. "That's fine. I can talk enough for both of us. See, I've been thinking about our little conversation at the wedding. About how you threatened me, in front of God and everybody." He spat in the dirt. "That ain't something a man forgets." "You should have forgotten it," Ezra said quietly. "Should have ridden out of town and kept riding. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." "Trouble?" Bran laughed. "Boy, you don't know what trouble is yet." Clara's heart hammered. She should have gone inside, should have hidden. But she couldn't make herself move, couldn't take her eyes off Ezra, standing there alone against 5 armed men. "What do you want, Doyle?" Ezra asked. "What I've always wanted. Respect." Bran took a step closer. "You made me look like a coward. Made me back down in front of the whole town. Now everyone thinks Bran Doyle's gone soft. That he's scared of some drifter with a dead man's eyes." Another step. "Can't have that. Bad for business. So you came here to do what prove you're tough." Ezra's voice dripped contempt. 5 against 1, real brave, Doyle. Your mother must be proud." Bran's face went purple. "My mother's dead." "Good. Means she doesn't have to see what a coward you turned into." The words hit like a slap. Bran's hand went to his gun, and Clara heard herself scream. "No!" She didn't think, just reacted. Rolled herself off the porch, no ramp, just dropped the 2 feet, and landed hard enough to jar her teeth and pushed toward them with every ounce of strength in her arms. "Clara, get back!" Ezra shouted. She ignored him, rolled right past him, put herself between her husband and 5 armed men, and looked Bran Doyle in his bloodshot eyes. "You want someone to shoot," she said. Her voice shook, but held. "Shoot me. I'm the one you crippled. I'm the one whose mother you burned alive. I'm the reason you're angry. So if you're going to kill someone, make it me. Leave him out of it." Bran stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Behind her, Clara heard Ezra make a sound that was half curse, half prayer. "Clara, move," he said. "No. Clara." "I said no." She kept her eyes on Bran. "You came here for revenge, for respect. Well, here's your chance. The whole town's been talking about poor Clara Winford, the girl you broke. Shoot me now. Prove you finished what you started. Show everyone exactly what kind of man you are." Bran's gun was half out of its holster. His hand trembled. "You think I won't?" "I think you're a coward who only feels strong when he's hurting people weaker than him. I think you lit that fire because my father beat you at cards and you couldn't stand losing. I think you've spent 2 years telling yourself I deserved what happened, because admitting you crippled an innocent girl would mean facing what a monster you really are." Clara's voice grew stronger with each word. "And I think if you shoot me now, the whole territory will know. You won't be Bran Doyle the tough outlaw. You'll be Bran Doyle the coward who murdered a crippled woman because she told him the truth." The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Bran's face worked through a dozen emotions: rage, shame, confusion, more rage. His gun cleared, leather rose, pointed straight at Clara's chest. Behind her, Ezra moved. She heard the rifle cock, heard him take one step forward, felt him stop just behind her wheelchair, close enough that if Bran fired, the bullet would have to go through her to reach him. "Last chance, Doyle," Ezra said. His voice was winter itself. "Put it down and ride out. Or find out what happens when you threaten my wife." "Your wife?" Bran laughed. The sound cracked and ugly. "That crippled thing, you're protecting a woman who can't even walk. What kind of man are you?" "The kind who keeps his promises." Ezra's hand settled on Clara's shoulder. Light, steady. "And I promised her no one would hurt her again. Especially not the coward who hurt her the first time. I ain't afraid of you." "You should be." Something in Ezra's voice made Clara's skin prickle. "I've killed harder men than you for lighter reasons. You want to test me? Go ahead. Draw. But know this, you might get one shot off before I put you down. Maybe you hit Clara. Maybe you hit me. But the second you pull that trigger, you're dead. And your boy's there." He shifted the rifle slightly, sweeping it across Bran's gang. "They'll have about 3 seconds to decide if dying for you is worth it. My guess it ain't." Rake shifted in his saddle. Sully's hand moved away from his gun. The two strangers exchanged glances. Bran saw it. Saw his backup melting away. Saw himself standing alone with a gun pointed at a crippled woman while her husband promised death. "This ain't over," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Yes," Clara said. "It is. You lost the second you came here. You lost the second you thought threatening me would break Ezra. You lost the second you pulled that gun and realized you don't have the courage to use it." She leaned forward in her wheelchair. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put that gun away. You're going to get on your horse. And you're going to ride to Sheriff Riggs' office and turn yourself in for arson and murder. Because if you don't, I will. And I'll testify. And I'll make sure everyone in 3 counties knows exactly what you did and how you tried to finish it today. You can't prove nothing. I can prove you were at the wedding making jokes about lighting the match. I can prove you just rode onto private property with 5 armed men to threaten a married couple. I can prove—" Her voice broke, but she forced herself on. "I can prove my mother died screaming your name because I was there, Bran. I heard everything. And I'll tell every word of it in court." Bran's gun lowered slightly. "Judge Parker will never convict me. He's my uncle." "Judge Parker's dead," Ezra said. "Died last month. Heart attack. New circuit judge is a woman named Abigail Chen, Tommy Chen's mother. You remember Tommy? The kid Clara used to race horses with. The one whose family you've been stealing from for years." He smiled without warmth. "Yeah, she'll convict you, and she'll enjoy it." The color drained from Bran's face. His gun dropped to his side. "You're lying!" "Ride into town and check. We'll wait." Ezra's hand stayed on Clara's shoulder. "Or you can do the smart thing and leave. Right now. Head for Mexico or California or hell itself. Just go. Because if I see you again, Doyle, I won't talk. I won't threaten. I'll just shoot. And unlike you, I don't miss." For 10 seconds, Bran stood there, gun hanging from his hand, face working through calculations. Then he holstered the weapon with a shaking hand. "This ain't over," he repeated, but it sounded like a prayer now. Like he was trying to convince himself. "It is," Clara said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Bran mounted his horse, jerked the reins too hard, nearly unseated himself. His gang was already retreating, unwilling to die for a man who couldn't even pull his own trigger. He glared at Clara one last time, then at Ezra, then spurred his horse and rode. They watched until the dust settled and the hoofbeats faded. Only then did Ezra's hand start to shake on Clara's shoulder. She reached up and covered it with her own. "It's okay. They're gone." "You rolled off the porch." His voice was strangled. "You put yourself between me and 5 armed men. Clara, what the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking they came here because of me. Because Bran couldn't stand that I survived him." She twisted in her chair to look up at him. "And I was thinking I'm done letting other people fight my battles." "That wasn't a battle. That was suicide." He pulled his hand away, started pacing. "You could have died. He had his gun out. He was going to shoot. If you..." He stopped, pressed his palms to his eyes. "Don't ever do that again." "I can't promise that." "Yes, you can. Promise me right now that you'll never..." "No." Clara rolled toward him. "I won't promise to let you die protecting me. I won't promise to hide while you face danger alone. I'm your wife Ezra, your partner. That means we face things together. Even the dangerous things, especially those. Partners don't sacrifice themselves. Partners do whatever it takes to keep each other alive." She grabbed his wrist, pulled until he looked at her. "You've spent 2 years punishing yourself for one moment of hesitation. Did you really think I'd let you die making up for it?" His face crumpled. "I can't lose you." "Then don't." She pulled harder, and he sank to his knees in front of her chair. "Don't lose me. Don't die trying to protect me. Just stay. Live. Help me be strong enough that we can face the next Bran Doyle together instead of taking turns playing hero. There shouldn't be a next one. This should be over." "Should be. But we both know it's not." Clara cupped his face in both hands. "Bran rode away, but he's not done. Men like him never are. He'll come back. Or he'll send someone else. Or he'll tell lies in town that make people turn against us. Whatever happens, it's not over." "Then what do? We finish it." Clara's jaw set. "We ride into town tomorrow. We tell Sheriff Rigg everything. We press charges. We make sure everyone knows what Bran did and what he tried to do today. We take away his power by refusing to be afraid of him. And if that doesn't work, then we fight." She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Together. Ezra stared at her for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. "You're terrifying," he whispered. "Absolutely terrifying." "Good." Clara closed her eyes, breathing him in. "Maybe people will finally stop underestimating me." They stayed like that until Clara's arms started shaking from holding her weight forward. Ezra noticed immediately, pulled back, helped her settle into the chair properly. "We should go inside," he said, "in case they come back." "They won't. Not today." But Clara let him push her toward the cabin anyway. "Bran's a coward. He'll need time to convince himself he's still dangerous. Time to drink. Time to gather more men who don't know better than to follow him." "How long?" "Week. Maybe 2. They made it inside. Ezra barred the door, checked the windows, positioned the rifle within easy reach. His hands moved automatically, checking security, while his mind was clearly elsewhere. Clara watched him and felt her heart twist. This was what guilt had made him: a man who couldn't rest, who saw threats in every shadow, who believed he deserved every bad thing that happened, because once, years ago, he'd frozen for 30 seconds. "Ezra," he turned from the window. "Yeah." "Come here, please." He crossed to her, moving slow, like he expected her to vanish if he moved too fast. She took his hands in hers. "You didn't fail today," she said. "You stood your ground. You protected me. And more importantly, you trusted me enough to let me speak, to let me face him. That's not failure. That's partnership." "I almost shot him." His voice was raw. "When he pointed that gun at you, I almost pulled the trigger. Didn't matter that you were in the line of fire. Didn't matter that I might hit you instead. I just wanted him dead." "But you didn't shoot. You waited. You trusted me." I was terrified. So was I. Clara squeezed his hands. But we did it anyway. That's what bravery is, Ezra. Not the absence of fear, just the refusal to let fear win. He pulled one hand free, traced her cheek with his thumb. When did you get so wise? When I married a man who builds mounting blocks and remembers what my laugh sounds like. She turned her face into his palm. When I realized that surviving fire doesn't make you weak. It just shows you what you're made of underneath. And what are you made of, steel? Clara smiled. Same as you. He smiled back, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face. Then he leaned down and kissed her. Not like the wedding kiss. Not like the forehead kiss after the storm. This was something else entirely. This was promise and partnership and the knowledge that they'd face death together and come out breathing. Clara kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All the fear, all the relief, all the complicated, terrifying feelings she'd been avoiding for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Ezra rested his forehead against hers again. I love you, he said. Simple, true. I know I have no right to. I know this marriage started with guilt and secrets. But Clara, I love you. Have since that first moment at the altar, when you looked at me like I might actually be worth something. Clara's breath caught. Her heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to hold back, to not give him power to hurt her. But she'd faced down Bran Doyle with nothing but words. Surely she could face this. I love you too, she whispered. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you knelt at the altar. Maybe when you built the mounting block. Maybe during the storm when you finally let me see past the guilt. She pulled back to look at him. But I love you, Ezra Cade. And that terrifies me more than any gun ever could. Why? Because guns can only kill your body. But loving someone, that can destroy your whole soul if it goes wrong. Her voice shook. And I can't lose anyone else. I can't survive losing you. You won't. He said it with absolute certainty. I'm not going anywhere, Clara. Not by choice. Not ever. You can't promise that. I can promise. I'll fight like hell to keep it true. He kissed her again, softer this time. And I can promise that whatever comes next, brand the town, anything, we face it together. No more taking turns playing hero. No more guilt. Just us. Partners. Partners, Clara agreed. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Ezra cleaned and loaded every gun in the cabin. Clara wrote out a detailed account of the fire, Bran's confession at the wedding, and today's confrontation. They made plans to ride into town at first light to speak to Sheriff Rigg to press charges before Bran could spin his own version of events. But beneath the preparation, something had shifted. They moved around each other differently now. Touched more. Spoke softer. Let their hands linger when they passed things back and forth. Love. Clara realized, didn't fix anything. Didn't make the danger disappear or the past hurt less. But it made the burden lighter. Made tomorrow feel possible instead of terrifying. That night, Clara lay in bed. Their bed. Now she'd insisted no more sleeping separately, with Ezra's arm around her waist and his breath warm against her neck. You awake? He murmured. Can't sleep. Me either. He pulled her closer. Keep thinking about Bran's face when you called him a coward. Pretty sure no one's ever talked to him like that. He deserved worse. Probably. Ezra's hand traced idle patterns on her arm. But what you said about testifying, you really think Judge Chen would convict him? I think she'd try. Tommy's family lost a lot to Bran's gang. She has personal motivation. Clara turned to face him. But even if she doesn't convict, even if Bran rides away free, at least we tried. At least we made him face what he did. That has to count for something. It counts for everything. He kissed her temple. You know that, right? That speaking up, facing him, refusing to hide, that's everything. Clara closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Let herself believe that maybe survival wasn't just about breathing. Maybe it was about standing up, about loving someone despite the risks, about building a life on something stronger than guilt. Maybe it was about being steel. Outside, the night was quiet. No storms, no hoofbeats. Just wind through the pines and the creek singing its endless song. But Clara knew it wouldn't last. Bran would come back, or someone worse would come, or life would throw some other nightmare their way. The difference now was that she wouldn't face it alone. She had Ezra, and he had her. And together, they were strong enough to face whatever came next, even if it killed them. Especially then. Dawn broke cold and clear, the kind of morning that felt like a promise. Clara woke wrapped in Ezra's arms, his heartbeat steady against her back, and for the first time in 2 years, she didn't immediately think about what she'd lost. She thought about what she'd found. "You ready for this?" Ezra's voice rumbled through his chest into her spine. "No." Clara turned to face him. "But I'm doing it anyway." They dressed in silence, both knowing what today meant. Town, Sheriff Rigg, formal charges. The moment where they'd either find justice or learn that the world didn't care what Bran Doyle had done. Ezra had hitched the wagon before she finished braiding her hair. He lifted her onto the bench with the same careful strength he always used, then climbed up beside her. The written testimony sat folded in her pocket, the paper heavy with words she'd bled to write. The ride to Duskwater took an hour. Neither of them spoke much. Ezra's hand rested on her knee, steady and warm. Clara kept her eyes on the road ahead and tried not to think about the last time she'd been to town, wheeled down that chapel aisle while people whispered. They crested the ridge, and Duskwater spread out below them. The town looked smaller than Clara remembered, less important. Just buildings and people living their small lives while pretending other people's tragedies weren't their concern. "You can still change your mind," Ezra said quietly. "We can turn around. Go home. Forget this." "No." Clara's voice was steel. "We can't. And you know it." He did. She saw it in the set of his jaw, the way his hands tightened on the reins. This wasn't just about Bran anymore. It was about drawing a line, about saying they wouldn't live in fear, about making the town see that Clara Cade wasn't someone to be pitied or mocked or ignored. They rolled down Main Street and heads turned. Of course they did. The crippled bride and her silent cowboy back in town for the first time since the wedding. Clara felt the stairs like insects crawling over her skin, but she kept her spine straight and her chin up. Sheriff Amos Rigg's office sat between the general store and the barber shop. Ezra pulled the wagon to a stop, set the brake, and came around to help Clara down. But before he could lift her, the door opened and Sheriff Rigg stepped out. He was a big man, barrel-chested and gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen too much and a mouth set in a permanent frown. He looked at Clara, then at Ezra, then back at Clara. "Heard you two had some trouble yesterday," he said without preamble. Clara's stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Bran Doyle rode through town last night, drunk, shooting his mouth off about how you threatened him, how Ezra here pulled a gun on him for no reason." Rigg crossed his arms. "That true?" "No." Ezra's voice was flat. "He came to our property with 5 armed men, threatened my wife, drew on her. We defended ourselves." "Got any proof?" Clara pulled out the folded paper. "I wrote down everything. The fire 2 years ago, Bran's confession at the wedding, yesterday's confrontation, all of it." Rigg took the paper, read it slowly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. When he finished, he looked at Clara. "This is serious stuff you're accusing him of. Murder, arson, attempted murder." He folded the paper carefully. "You understand what happens if you file these charges. Bran's got friends, family, people who'll make your life hell." "My life's already been hell," Clara said. "At least this way I'm fighting back." Something that might have been respect crossed Rigg's face. Fair enough. He looked at Ezra. You willing to testify? Back up her story. Every word of it. And you're aware that filing false charges is a crime. We're aware. Ezra's hand found Clara's shoulder. Every word is true, Sheriff. You want more witnesses? Talk to the 200 people at our wedding who heard Bran brag about lighting the fire. Talk to Judge Chen's boy Tommy, who was there when it happened. Talk to anyone who's been robbed by Bran's gang in the last 5 years. Rig was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. I'll file the charges. Judge Chen's circuit brings her through next week. You'll need to testify then, both of you. He looked at Clara. You sure you can handle that? Standing up in court facing Bran and his uncle's friends, telling this story to a room full of people who might not believe you. I've faced worse, Clara said simply. Rig almost smiled. I believe you have. He turned to go inside, then stopped. For what it's worth, Mrs. Cade, I'm sorry. Sorry no one believed you 2 years ago when you said it was arson. Sorry the old judge was too crooked to prosecute his own nephew. Sorry you had to live with that for so long. The apology hit Clara like a physical thing. She hadn't expected it, hadn't realized how much she needed someone in authority to acknowledge what had been done to her. Thank you, she managed. Rig nodded and disappeared into his office, taking Clara's testimony with him. Ezra helped her back onto the wagon bench. His hands shook slightly. That went better than I expected, he said. It's not over. We still have to testify, still have to face him in court. I know. He climbed up beside her. But at least it started. At least someone's listening. They were halfway down Main Street when Clara heard her name called. She turned to see Betsy Callahan hurrying toward them, her face flushed. Clara's first instinct was to tell Ezra to keep driving, but something in Betsy's expression stopped her. Wait, she said. Ezra pulled the wagon to a halt. Betsy reached them breathing hard and looked up at Clara with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Betsy said. The words tumbled out fast, desperate. I'm so sorry, Clara, for laughing at the wedding, for not visiting after the fire. For all of it. I was a coward and a terrible friend, and Her voice broke. I should have been there for you, should have stood up for you, and I didn't. And I'm so sorry. Clara stared at her former friend. Part of her wanted to accept the apology immediately, to say it was fine to smooth everything over the way women were taught to do. But the larger part, the part that had faced down Bran Doyle yesterday, refused. You're right, Clara said quietly. You were a coward. You laughed when I needed you to stand up. You abandoned me when I needed friends. And saying sorry now doesn't change that. Betsy flinched like she'd been slapped. But, Clara continued, it's a start. You want to make it right. Actually make it right, not just say words that make you feel better. Yes, anything. Testify. Next week when Judge Chen comes. Tell her you heard Bran brag about the fire at the wedding. Tell her how he threatened me. Be a witness when it matters. Betsy's face went pale. Clara, if I testify against Bran, his gang will what do to you, what they did to me? Clara leaned forward. That's the cost, Betsy. That's what it means to actually be sorry instead of just saying it. Are you willing to pay it? For a long moment, Betsy didn't answer. Clara could see the war playing out on her face, fear versus guilt, self-preservation versus doing what was right. Finally, Betsy nodded. I'll testify. I'll tell Judge Chen everything I heard. Her voice steadied. And I'll talk to the other girls, Mary and Susan, and the others who were there. Maybe if enough of us speak up, it'll make a difference. Maybe it will, Clara said. Then softer. Thank you. Betsy nodded, wiped her eyes, and walked away. Ezra watched her go, then looked at Clara. That was kind, he said, giving her a chance to make it right. Wasn't kindness, was strategy. Clara's jaw set. We need witnesses, need people willing to stand up. If Betsy can find her courage, maybe others will too. You're brilliant, you know that. I'm desperate. She met his eyes. There's a difference. They left town and headed home. The ride back felt different, lighter somehow, like they'd set down a burden they'd been carrying too long. Clara leaned against Ezra's shoulder and watched the land roll past. What happens if Judge Chen doesn't convict him? She asked. Then we tried. That's all we can do. And if he comes back, if he decides to finish what he started? Ezra's arm came around her. Then we fight, like you said, together. The week before the trial crawled past. Clara practiced her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep. Ezra cleaned his guns obsessively, preparing for trouble that might or might not come. They slept pressed close, taking comfort in each other's presence, and tried not to think about what failure would mean. 3 days before Judge Chen was due to arrive, Clara woke to find Ezra already up, standing at the window. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Thinking." He didn't turn around. "About what comes after?" "After the trial. After everything." He finally looked at her. "Win or lose, things change next week. Either Bran goes to jail and we get peace, or he doesn't, and we spend the rest of our lives watching our backs. Either way, this cabin stops being a hideout and becomes something permanent. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's just..." He struggled for words. "I built this place as penance, as a way to make up for failing you. But if we win, if we actually get justice, then what? What's my purpose after the debt's paid?" Clara pushed herself up. "Your purpose is being my husband, my partner, the man I love." She gestured for him to come closer. "The debt was never real, Ezra. You created it because guilt was easier than believing you deserved good things. But you do deserve them. You deserve a life that's more than punishment." He crossed to her, sat on the edge of the bed. "And if I don't know how to live that life, then we figure it out together." Clara took his hand. "We learn what happiness looks like. We build something bigger than guilt. We have a life." "What kind of life?" "I don't know yet." She smiled. "But I'd like to find out." The morning of the trial arrived with clear skies and warm wind. Clara dressed in her best dress, green, the color of life and growing things. Ezra wore a clean shirt and his only tie. They looked like respectable citizens, not the wounded survivors they'd been 3 months ago. The courthouse was packed. Seemed like half of Duskwater had turned out to watch the crippled bride accuse Bran Doyle of murder. Clara felt their eyes on her as Ezra pushed her wheelchair down the aisle, but this time the stairs didn't make her want to shrink. They made her lift her chin higher. Judge Abigail Chen sat at the bench, her dark eyes sharp and her mouth set in a line that promised no nonsense. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe 40, with gray threading through her black hair and hands that looked like they knew work. Bran sat at the defendant's table with a lawyer his dead uncle must have paid for. He looked cleaner than usual, sober, almost respectable. But when his eyes met Clara's, the hatred there was pure and undiluted. She didn't look away. The trial took all day. Clara testified, first telling her story in a voice that shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. She told about the fire, about hearing her mother's screams, about the beam crushing her legs, about Bran's confession at the wedding, about him coming to the cabin with 5 armed men to finish what he started. The lawyer tried to break her, called her emotional, unreliable, bitter, said she was making up stories to punish a man she blamed unfairly for an accident. "It wasn't an accident," Clara said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "It was murder, and I'm not making anything up. I'm just finally telling the truth that no one wanted to hear 2 years ago." Ezra testified next, told about being the deputy who'd responded too slow, about pulling Clara from the flames, about resigning in shame, about coming back to make things right and finding Bran still free still dangerous, still terrorizing innocent people. Then Betsy took the stand, and Mary, and Susan, and 6 other people who'd been at the wedding, all telling the same story. Bran had bragged about the fire, had laughed about it, had threatened Clara in front of God and 200 witnesses. The lawyer tried to discredit them too. But it's hard to discredit 8 people telling the same truth. By the time the testimony ended, the sun was setting. Judge Chen called a recess until morning for closing arguments. Clara and Ezra spent the night in the town's only hotel. They lay awake in the narrow bed listening to the town settle around them. "Think we did enough," Clara whispered. "I think we told the truth. That's all we can do. And if the truth isn't enough..." Ezra pulled her closer. "Then we keep living anyway. We keep building our life. We refuse to let him win by making us afraid." The next morning, closing arguments were brief. The lawyer claimed Bran was innocent, that Clara was a bitter woman, looking for someone to blame, that eyewitness testimony from a wedding full of drunk people meant nothing. Sheriff Rigg, who'd apparently been investigating since Clara filed charges, stood up and presented evidence. Bills of sale from goods Bran had stolen. Testimonies from other families he'd terrorized. A pattern of violence stretching back years. Judge Chen listened to it all without expression. Then she dismissed everyone for deliberation. They waited 2 hours. Clara counted every minute. Finally, the bailiff called them back. The courtroom filled. Clara gripped Ezra's hand so hard her fingers went numb. Judge Chen looked at Bran Doyle. "Stand up." He did, his face pale. "I've heard a lot of testimony in my years on the bench," Chen said. "Heard liars and truth-tellers. Heard desperate people and vengeful ones, and I've learned to tell the difference." She paused. "Mrs. Cade is telling the truth. Every witness who testified against you confirmed it. The evidence Sheriff Rigg presented supports it. And your own behavior at the Cade cabin, threatening an unarmed woman in her own home, proves you're exactly the kind of man who'd burn a stable and laugh about it." Bran's lawyer started to object. Chen silenced him with a look. "Bran Doyle, I find you guilty of arson murder and attempted murder. I sentence you to hang." The courtroom erupted, but Chen's voice carried over the noise. "And I'm issuing warrants for the arrest of your accomplices, Rake Sully and the others, who participated in threatening the Cades. This territory is done tolerating men like you." 2 deputies grabbed Bran before he could run. He fought screaming threats and curses, but they dragged him out. The last thing Clara saw was his face twisted with rage and fear as he disappeared through the courthouse doors. Then it was over. Just like that. 2 years of pain, 3 months of fear, 1 week of testimony. And it was over. Clara sat in her wheelchair and felt nothing. Not relief. Not joy. Just a vast echoing emptiness where hatred used to live. Ezra knelt beside her. "Clara, you okay?" "I don't know." She looked at him. "I thought I'd feel different. Victorious or relieved or something. But I just feel empty." "That's normal. You've been carrying this for so long you don't know who you are without it." He took her hand. "But you'll figure it out. We both will." People wanted to congratulate them. Sheriff Rigg shook Ezra's hand. Judge Chen told Clara she was brave. Betsy hugged her and cried. The whole town seemed to suddenly remember that Clara Cade was a person who deserved justice. Clara accepted it all with numb politeness, but all she wanted was to go home. They left Duskwater as the sun set, painting the sky the color of fire and healing. Clara leaned against Ezra and watched the town disappear behind them. "What now?" she asked. "Now we live." Ezra kissed the top of her head. "We finish building the life we started. We figure out what happiness looks like when it's not borrowed or guilty or temporary." "I want to keep riding," Clara said suddenly. "Every day. Until I can gallop again. Until I can race like I used to. Then we'll ride. And I want to help people. Other people like me who got hurt and had their lives stolen. I want to show them survival isn't the end. Then we'll help them. And I want to love you. Her voice broke. Not because you saved me or I saved you, just because we choose each other every day. Then we'll love each other. Ezra's arms tightened around her. Every single day, for the rest of our lives. A month later, Clara sat on Willow at the top of the ridge overlooking their cabin. Ezra sat beside her on his gelding, both horses patient beneath them. Below the cabin stood solid and real. Smoke curled from the chimney. The garden they'd planted together was starting to bloom. It looked like a home, not a penance. "Ready?" Ezra asked. Clara looked at the long slope leading down to the creek. It wasn't a race, wasn't a competition. Just two people on horses about to ride fast for the simple joy of moving. "Ready?" she said. They kicked their horses into a gallop. The wind tore at Clara's hair. Her legs were weak, her balance imperfect, but she stayed mounted through sheer will and muscle memory. Willow's hooves drummed against the earth, and Clara felt something inside her chest crack open. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She laughed that same laugh Ezra had remembered from years ago, the one that sounded like music, and heard him laugh beside her. They raced down the slope, side by side, neither ahead nor behind, just together. The cabin grew closer. The creek sang its endless song. The world was wide and beautiful, and full of possibility. When they finally slowed at the bottom, both breathing hard, Clara looked at her husband. At the man who'd failed her and saved her and loved her through it all. "Again?" she asked. Ezra grinned. "Again." They turned their horses and rode back up the ridge, ready to race again, ready to live again, ready to prove that fire and guilt and pain weren't the end of any story. They were just the beginning of learning what it meant to be unbreakable. Because love in the frontier wasn't about walking tall or standing alone or being perfect. It was about finding someone who saw your scars and called them beautiful. Who built you ramps when the world said you'd never climb. Who knelt at altars and made towns remember that dignity mattered more than pity. It was about choosing partnership over pride, forgiveness over revenge, hope over fear. It was about two broken people building something whole from all their shattered pieces. And as Clara and Ezra raced toward the setting sun, their laughter echoing across the plains, the town of Duskwater learned what it meant to underestimate the crippled bride and her silent cowboy. They learned that some loves aren't just survived, they're forged in fire and tempered in tears and made stronger than steel. They learned that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. And they learned that Clara Cade would never kneel again because she'd already survived worse than anything this world could throw at her and come out riding.